The good news is that we're just about through with the participles, and we're at a point where I think that the adjectival participle that I'll be dealing with today, and I'm going to give you 3 examples of it, is somewhat easier to understand than the adverbial participle, primarily because it functions essentially as an adjective, and therefore, just like an adjective, it's going to modify the noun or else that it's with, but it's going to also then function as a noun, or it could be as a noun as a predicate adjective, then functioning as that noun, or else will actually function as a noun itself, usually with the article before it, so therefore with in the attributive position. So basically we're going to look at 3 forms of it: a verbal adjective, in other words then that has the characteristic of both a verb and an adjective. With the verb then it has tense and it has voice, and with as an adjective then it can be declined just like an adjective with case and gender and number. The first one then I want to look at just briefly is the attributive participle, which really means then it attributes something to the noun. So in other words, it modifies the noun. So you have a noun and then you have a verbal idea in the participle, and that verbal idea modifies the noun. So therefore it's going to have case and gender and number. And if it's if there's an article with it, then it will be in the attributive position, just like we learned in respect to how adjectives function with nouns. So I'm going to give you a couple of examples of that, the attributive participle. And the first one is from Philippians 4 verse 7. He arene tu theu, he huperexuta, panta non phronese tas cardias humon. So you can see briefly there the first declension feminine noun for peace. The peace of God, genitive, masculine of theo, the peace of God, and then here is the verb huperekamai, which is deponent, which is passive then in form but active in meaning, means something like which overcomes or surpasses. And you can see that it's in the attributive case because the noun erene and the adjective functioning participle there have both got the feminine article with it, because the feminine article with the participle is because of its adherence to the noun, which is feminine, erene. So if you take out then the prepositional, the genitive phrase there, tu theu, then you can see it very, very clearly. So it's the attributive position in what I call the long form. That is, the adjective is before the noun and before the definite article is before the adjective and before the noun. Here, of course, when it's not simply an adjective, it's a participle, it's a verbal idea functioning as an adjective. So the peace of God, surpassing, and then you have that third declension adjective all. Noon is mind, and then we have a verb in the future, as you can see from the sigma and the ending, will protect, taskid cardias humon, the hearts, feminine, plural, accusative, of you. So the peace of God, surpassing all understanding, will protect your hearts. You can see there how the verb functions then in the attributive position as it modifies the noun erene. The peace of God surpassing, or which surpasses. Notice that it's got a present meaning as a middle and passive deponent, so therefore you translate it in the present. Surpasses all meaning, all understanding will protect your hearts. Or to put it in better English, the peace of God which surpasses all understanding will protect your hearts. And my second example is from John 6 verse 50. Here we've got the Houtos estin ha atos ha ek tu uranu kata bainon. The demonstrative adjective here, this one is third person singular of the verb to be, present tense, and then the bread. It's not. It's in apposition here is artos, so it's not an object. It agrees with the nominative, so therefore with the subject. So therefore it will be in the nominative. This one is the bread. Now here's the relative pronoun. Again, notice that it's in agreement as a relative pronoun, and therefore will be part of a subordinate clause, which agrees with hutos, so therefore it will be nominative, masculine, singular. This one is the bread which, and then you've got your prepositional phrase, ek tu uranu, out of heaven, and then coming down, literally, I suppose you could say, coming down, katabino, present participle active. So therefore, then, this one is the bread, which is what? Which is coming down out of heaven. So if you take out the prepositional phrase, ek tu uranu, you can see then how the adjective functions there, ho katabainon, which basically is a parallel to the apposition of ho autos. This is the bread, that is the one, the bread and the one coming out of heaven. So let's move on to that. I just wanted to give a couple of examples of participles in the attributive position. Now let's look at the participle just briefly as it functions really as a noun, as a substantival position. I always get confused about that. Many years ago, when I first started studying at Fuller Seminary, I'd come from New Zealand, and I was in a class of about 200 with Ralph Martin, who was a brilliant scholar, and he was referring to substantives, and for the life of me, I did not know what a substantive was, and I'd been studying theology for about 3 years. So with great courage, I put my hand up in front of a class and said, "What is a substantive?" And he looked at me and he said, "A noun." And I knew immediately what that meant. It meant that he's English and I'm English, because in the English tradition, which I did my Greek in New Zealand before I went to Fuller Seminary, then a substantive is a noun. Let's keep it simple. So I learned then, I felt of course like an idiot asking such a simple question, but so what? I learned something new from that standpoint. Its use is, I'm not sure what its use is, but we'll call it that, a substantival participle in respect to what? Then it functions as a noun, and therefore it's going to have number, and it's going to have gender, and it's going to have case. So the one that I picked then is from Matthew 10:37. Hophilon patera he metera hupe eme uk estin mu axios. Here is phileos, you know, fairly regular verb, although the stem ends in an epsilon. Present participle, functioning basically what? As a noun. Notice the article then before the verb. Literally, the one loving, and then we get in the accusative case, or he who loves who? Well, father or mother, third declension nouns. Above me, where there takes the accusative case. Now, is not worthy of me. Axios also there, functioning then, second declension masculine adjective, and agreeing also, because it's in apposition as an adjective, it's agreeing with the subject, as you can see here. So, literally it's the one who loves father and mother, or he who loves father and mother more than me is not worthy of me. You can see then, simply put, the participle functions as an adjective, as a noun, and you can tell with the article before it, then it's going to have that strength, so to speak, in that place. So the one who loves, or he who loves. The second example I picked is from Acts 5:14. Prosethento pistuantes to curio. Now, you've not really come across this very regular verb, so don't be concerned about it. It's from prostithemi. It's here indicative imperfect passive, so it's literally something like were added, something that was done to them in the past, imperfect, and then, so who is this now? Here are the verb, which functions here as a noun in its participle form. Notice that the subject then is nominative, plural, present participle. So it's literally present participle. The ones believing were added to curio, dative, to the Lord. And then my final example is from the predicative participle in respect to what it asserts something about the subject as a predicate. In other words, then it sort of links then with the verb, and it has a case and gender and noun. As the noun, it functions then not as an object, as in the accusative, but in opposition to the subject, and so therefore it's going to be in the same case. And the examples that I've got, one is from Revelation 1:18, egenomen, nekros, kai, idou, zon, eimi, eis, tus, ionos, ton, ionon. Now, ginomai, as you know, is the deponent verb. It's active, passive in form, but present in meaning. Nekros is a second declension adjective. I became, ginomai has many meanings. I happen, I became, I was. I was dead, there in apposition, not as the object, but as the with the subject, so to speak. I was dead, kai, and behold, exclamation. Now, eimi, think of it here, eimi functions as a parallel to egenomen. So therefore, I was dead, but behold, I am, in other words, present tense, not imperfect, living. I am the one living. So zone, which then is a verb to live, is used here as a as a predicate in opposition in the same sense of its parallel with nekros, and therefore must be nominative, masculine, singular as a participle. This is basically a well-known phrase here. It really means, literally, it's into forever of forever, or I'm living forever and ever. So you can see there how the verb zone functions in respect to the predicative position in terms of apposition to the subject and paralleled with the previous clause on it. So therefore I've looked now at just three notions of attributive use of a participle, and I think it's a lot easier. You come across them, it's very common, especially in the attributive case with the article. It's very common in the New Testament, and I think it's a lot easier to understand than the verbal uses of the participle. Thanks.